we built a company that we loved, Babylon. Babylon changed our view of what is possible. It changed our view of our capabilities that we can deliver medicine on the phone, healthcare on the phone.
So what did go wrong, and when did it go wrong?
Super simple. Look, we made a lot of mistakes, and I can come to that. But those mistakes were not why Babylon went wrong. There is no such thing as complete success. There's no such thing as complete failure. Life, you just play.
I mean, you intentionally, clearly went quiet for a year after Babylon. And the problem with that, if you leave a space, if you leave a vacuum, it will be filled, especially one of opinion. Why not come out and say your regrets and those things in the face of those things? The following is a conversation with Ali Parsa, one of the most fascinating and some might say controversial figures in health tech. He's a physicist by training, a former banker, and the founder of Babylon Health, which, as I'm sure you all know, was once one of the most ambitious and well-known health tech companies in the world. Babylon, as we know, collapsed. Billions of dollars in value, NHS partnerships, grand visions of AI-powered healthcare, all gone. And in its wake, a lot of questions. Now, Ali hasn't spoken much publicly since then. This was, as you know, quite a difficult interview to get. And I want to approach it with care because there will be people who say, I didn't push him hard enough, that I should have gone in more aggressively. But so you know, I asked hard questions. Was your AI just a spreadsheet? Did pension funds lose money? Does he regret going quiet if he had nothing to hide? I asked, and now you get to hear those answers. I also believed that if Ali wanted to build again in health tech, then he owed it to the sector to share what he learned, and that was the premise of this conversation. And I said as much in a video before this interview, and to his credit, he answered that call. He came on, he spoke about Babylon, he spoke about what comes next, which is his new company Quadrivia, and he talked about why he still believes in transforming healthcare at that scale. I also want to say this, whatever you think of Ali Parsa, he's a human being, and he's a man who built something huge, something that meant a lot to the health tech industry, and actually to me personally. As a fan of health tech, I actually wanted Babylon to succeed. I had friends who worked there. It was a company that pushed a huge amount of boundaries, and its fall wasn't just Ali Parsa's story, it was a moment in the history of health tech. So my goal here was not to play judge and jury, it was to listen. I wanted to speak to him as a person, to try and understand him and to kind of make my own mind up. And now you have the opportunity to do that too. So here is my conversation with Ali Parsa. So Ali Parsa, welcome to Healthtech Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. In my age, you wake up, it's a fantastic day.
Fantastic, yeah. I've got a 10-week-old son currently, and so I'm starting to find the joy in just waking up and looking at him. And so he changes a little bit every day. I'm noticing time is actually passing a little bit slower at the moment, but I'm starting to really appreciate the word family, Ali. So it's a new one for me.
I actually think that our children humanize us, make us so much kinder as human beings. Because I see now, anything I do, I always think about this person could be my kid. Or every time I see a kid suffering, I think that could be my kid. While before you have children, you're so engaged in your own whatever you're doing, and you're kind of always cautious to yourself. So you say, okay, if I can put up with it, this person can. So I think kids add so much to us, but above everything else, they add humanity to us.
I'm definitely feeling that. And I guess one of the first things I wanted to ask you about actually was family, because you had a very difficult, from what I've read anyway, you had a very difficult conversation with your father in Iran at a very difficult time during the revolution and had to flee the country, and you fled to London. And I'm curious about the things that shape us, particularly entrepreneurs, the things that give us drive, the things that give us resilience, the things that give us, will make us who we are. And with everything that you've gone on to achieve, it's just interesting to me if you're happy sharing your kind of origin story back when you were 16 and that happening, and what you think that did to you as a person and your ambition and what you wanted to achieve and all that kind of stuff.
You know, that's very kind of you. I'm not sure, James, whether uh, is it the chicken or is it the egg? Did I leave Iran in search of a better life at the time that universities were getting shut down and I knew I couldn't get to university anymore? Uh, or and therefore I became a refugee as a result of who I was, or did I become who I am because I became a refugee, right? I just think that these things are never one event that leads to another, but I think that every single event shapes you and leaves its mark on you. And being a refugee at the age of 16, leaving your country, arriving in a land you don't know. I remember when I very first time I arrived in UK, it was winter and it was raining, and I just landed, uh, and and I was going down M4, and I was looking at the lights, and they were yellow, and it was misty. And in Iran, the lights are white and they're bright, and the sky is bright. And I just thought, on one hand, what a beautiful scene, and on the other hand, how sad I am, because this is really the new chapter in your life. And the last time I was traveling on a motorway was with my father with me, and I just thought, I don't know, when would I ever talk to him again or see him again? So, it was a really interesting one chapter finishing, another starting, but even the smells, the scenery, the lights, everything changed. Um, and that shapes you, that makes you just kind of say, okay, I need to now deal with this, right? And it was tough, right? You're alone. I didn't speak any language, not a single word in English. I was the kind of guy you would see on the street and say what time it is and say, I am very well, how are you? I just didn't know. And and uh, uh, I had to put myself with, I had also no money. So I had to learn the language, put myself through O levels at the time, which was GCSEs of today, A levels. And I remember I just went and chose a book for my A level physics, for instance, and I had to, and then I read it cover to cover, did all the tests at the end of the book, and that was it. That was my preparation. I sat my two maths and one physics A level, and I did an art A level just to get something different in my head. But basically, I had locked myself in a room and done that in about 7-8 months, and sat the exam to get through it, to get to university. So it was really hard time. It was lonely. You had no money. You were just working towards your goal. But it was also the time that shapes you, right? You just say, if I can go through this poverty, having come from a middle class family, through this loneliness, having come from an extended family and friends and organizations that I used to be members of, and playing football all the time, and you just learn. You learn that you can deal with this, therefore you can deal with anything. And I think that's great training for being an entrepreneur, or being anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, quite. It's interesting that you said you did art to put something else in your head. That's interesting. I noticed behind you, for anyone watching on YouTube anyway, there's some absolutely glorious artwork behind you. You went on to do a PhD in engineering physics as well. And so very, very different to someone that might appreciate art. But art obviously associated with creativity, people that bring things into the world, they create something from nothing. I think it is something, particularly the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed on this podcast, it seems actually quite common that people mix art and creativity with a hard science, and eventually, that creativity and artistic element never leaves them, and they have to create, they have to build something. It was a conscious decision, though, for yourself to do art. Were you good at art? Are you still good at art? Do you appreciate good art now?
I appreciate good art. I appreciate beauty. I'm married to the most beautiful woman in the world. I always like to live in a place that is aesthetically beautiful. Um, and I think anybody who doesn't appreciate beauty kind of doesn't appreciate life, right? I mean,
Mm.
and art is an attempt to express the world around us. But so is creating a business, is an attempt to express the world around you. And that's why I think people who build businesses, uh, there are those who build a business to make money, but there are those who build a business to create something. And there are those
Mm.
who build a business to create something beautiful. And then there are those who create a business to create something beautiful and meaningful and worthwhile. And I just think that doing all of those things take the same amount of work, effort,
Mm.
and hassle. So why not do something that is beautiful, meaningful, impactful, solves a problem? Um,
Mm.
so I don't, by the way, I don't think these are selfless acts. I think these are actually highly selfish acts because you do it in order to satisfy yourself. I just have no time for these people who kind of say, I created that business or I'm doing this to save the world, to do this above everybody else. We're trying to satisfy our own needs and desires. And hopefully, by
Mm.
doing that, we choose to do it in an area that helps and satisfies other people's needs and desires. So,
But it also creates skill, or takes skill, doesn't it, to create a business? It takes experience to build a big business. And you started your first business during your PhD. You started a business called V&G, I saw. And I was reading yesterday and this morning about your background. I hadn't quite appreciated that you'd started a media promotion company and you won a Royal Award for the Young Entrepreneur of the Year. First businesses, I think, are really interesting for entrepreneurs, especially people we've had on the show, and it's where people make their mistakes. It's where people, learn the ropes. What do you remember of V&G? What was it?
so VMG was Victoria and Gilan. Victoria was where my wife came from, and Gilan was the part of Iran I came from.
Mm.
And so we set something up because we were both dirt poor, had no money, but we were both trying to study. And nobody employs you and pays you to study. So we fell into this by necessity, right? We had to create something. It couldn't be full time because we needed time to study. So we were both student activists. I was on the National Union on the national executive of the National Union of Students. She was my counterpart in Canada. We had come to UK to live together. So the very first event we did was we tried to organize a ginormous festival in a Greek island for British students. And we did superbly well. Lots of people were buying tickets because we had our network of student unions that was distributing that, James. And then the first Gulf War happened. And overnight, all our tickets got cancelled because which parent is going to let
Of
their kid?
course.
So, and there we learned our first lesson, right? We had sold all the tickets, we had all the commitments, we had booked the flights, and then everything got cancelled on us. And we looked at each other, shell shocked, that our first business is going to be a disaster. But then we said, how do we save this, right? And there were various newspapers, including the Guardian newspaper, that was going to cover that event for its students. And
Mm.
I went to the Guardian out of desperation, said, you guys were super excited about what this event was going to be. Students are not going to come. We all know that the Gulf War is going to finish. So why don't we turn that into an event for your readers who are adults and then turn it into a festival of Guardian readers? And I remember they introduced me to the marketing person. The marketing person took one look at me and my wife. We were 22, 23 at the time. And at the time, she was my girlfriend. And she said, you guys are either mad or you're going to do something great. And I am going to take a chance on you. And that's the true secret of every entrepreneur, every business. We all think it is us who do something. But in reality, it's all the people who help us, who take a chance on us, who give us a supporting hand. And her name was Sarah, and I'm forever indebted to her. She took a chance on us. It ended up being the best event Guardian had ever done. The next year they did 6, the year after they did 20, then the Daily Telegraph came, then the Observer came, then the BBC came, and we were doing these events which was physical manifestations of the media and the readers and the journalists together into a week of poetry, journalism, creative writing, but also sun, sand. It was fantastic, fantastic events. And I am in awe of our 22, 23, 24-year-old of ourselves, that how did we pull this off? You know what I mean? It's the stupidity of the youth that you just don't know what you're getting yourself into. And it was full of mistakes, full of problems. I remember one festival, James, we went to, I arrived the day before. It was in a Greek island in Crete. And the agent had given away, had sold us the accommodation, but when we arrived, all the accommodation had already tourists in them. They had double sold it because they said to these 24-year-olds, let's take their money and screw them, right? And I had to basically knock on doors overnight and find different accommodation. Then I had 250 people arriving. They didn't have the accommodation they booked. We had to give them something else. But one thing I learned in that business was the only thing that matters is your customer satisfaction. Go over and above. I did everything I could to give people a good time. We lost a lot of money on that, but it didn't matter. People went away. They saw that circumstances happened. We were very transparent about it. We did all we can, and everybody was giving us a glorifying reviews because of the way we dealt with the. Anyways, that's another story.
Just a couple of things on that. What do you think they saw in you, and do you look for that in other people now?
Yes, I think the thing I look in other people, I look for somebody who wants to give it all, and who wants to give it all for the benefit of what they say they want to do. So if somebody comes in and say, I'm going to do this in order to get rich, then they're basically never going to make it because doing anything is so hard that at some stage you're going to say, gee, this was too hard. I'm better off go and get a job, and you give up, right? Because your motivation was about you. If somebody comes in and says, look, I'm going to make the best festival ever for your readers, that's a very different motivation. And frankly, that was always our motivation. I want to make the best festival ever. I don't care if I made money or not, but I believe that if I make the best festival ever, I will make money because people want great things, right? And we did really well. When we started Circle, we wanted to build the best hospital ever. Even today, almost 20 years after we started Circle, you look at Circle Bath, is still winning the award for the best hospital in the world. Like, people from Foster's contacted me a few months ago saying that we just won again the award for best hospital design in the world, right? Again, with Babylon, we wanted to build the best service in the world. I think you're a GP, right?
Anesthetist. Well, I was an anesthetist.
So, but think about it. Like, your GP today, even today, you can't see your GP within minutes. We created a service that you could see a GP within minutes, right? And it was incredibly hard. And the people who bought it from us completely, like, now it takes 2 weeks, right? I'm glad that it's not our name on it anymore. But it just goes to show how hard it is to make something work superbly well.
It does, and also, but also requires the motivation of those leading to find a way, because that's the other thing, is that you will be hit with adversity as a business owner. is, though, incumbent on you to find a way. It seems like the thread running through what you just said, you're talking about fleeing and making it work. You're talking about all the accommodation cancelling and eventually it's fine. It's taking responsibility and finding a way as well. And is that something that you feel is part of you? You will always find a way.
Because I think there is always a way. There is an old Iranian poem that says, brain says there is 6 direction and that's the limit. And heart says there is more and I have been many times. And I just think that there is no such thing apart from when you die, where there is no other way. And and even with, I'm sure we come to talk about it, even we built a company that we loved, Babylon, and we lost it. But there wasn't a single door we didn't knock in. There wasn't a single thing we didn't do. For 18 months, I almost never slept. I ended up with 4 ulcers, dreadful health by the time it finished. But I can honestly say, and all of my investors did, and all the other people, that we did everything we could to get it done. And sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you get checkmated, it's done. But then we went in to set up Quadrivia to continue almost the same mission, right? So yes, one thing doesn't work, but the only thing that kills you is if you stop. If you keep going, you just keep going, right? It's like survivors in the cold, right? If they keep going, they keep going. And by the way, all of our time sometimes come for a person, for a company, for anything. At some stage you die, right? That's part of life. And I think that's the only time that you could give up, right?
Yeah, you mentioned your health. You talked about the morbid reality that we all die, and you've also talked about finding beauty in life, and part of that is to remain healthy. Now, you chose healthcare to innovate in next. I mean, you went to Goldman, Merrill Lynch, etc., etc. The financial career that you had, certainly rising to the top of that industry. You chose healthcare, I believe, after a knee surgery, and you thought, I can do this better, and again, finding a way. Is that the reason? Were you really sat in a hospital bed thinking, you know what, I can do hospitals better?
Yes, I wanted to be an entrepreneur again. My first child got born. I took 2 weeks of paternity leave, went back, saw my boss, who at the time was the European head of Goldman Sachs. And I told him, Scott, I'm done. I've just never been an investment banker. It's just not in my nature. And not because I have anything against investment banking. All this nonsense we hear, bankers are this. I mean, everybody wants to do a job and they're making a living. It was just because that banking is a project-based profession, like management consultancy. And I love building things over a long period of time, compounding building. And that was what was destroying my soul. It was the fact that I would work with entrepreneurs or CEOs and help them in a chapter in their business, but then I had to go away and not watch that thing. And I noticed about myself that I love building things, and that was a good way to notice, to learn this about yourself. So I came back and was looking to build something. I actually built a um, a learning business first, right? Which we don't talk about, but it was a very good business. We kind of figured out that much of learning is done with books and leaflets and things like that, and we thought we can take it online. We're talking 2004, so we went and talked to a business in Ireland. We bought a business in Ireland, or agreed to buy a business in Ireland that had a big customer base of selling to them corporations corporate learning, right? But through old-fashioned ways. Then we went to the BBC at the time and we said to them, look, you guys have so much content, you're doing nothing with it. Could we, and it's digital, could we take that and deliver it on computers to employees? And they said, well, we're not making any money on this. If you can make money on it, sure. So we signed that. Then we went and to a software company and we asked them if they would build it for us. And they said no. And they demanded a ridiculous price. And we said, but your only assets are your employees. And they said, yes. And I said, look, we pay for those employees and profit to you. And the person in there said, what do you want to do with it? We described to her all we wanted to do. I said, that's a great idea. I'm going to do it myself. And no, we won't sell it to you. And I said, fine. And I was a little bit more aggressive at the time than I am today. So I went and stood outside her door with a contract for every employee saying that if you come and join my business and do this thing, we will give you your current salary plus 20%, and you don't need to work for this person. And because she was not a nice person at all. And incredible, James, every single employee and I said, I'm in a pub tonight.
Wow.
And if you come, we'll hire you. Every single employee came to the pub, signed their contract. We took our employee base away. And so now we had a great distribution, a fantastic set of contents, a great group of engineers, and went to exercise our option and to buy that company. And the Irish guy said, I'm sorry, I won't sell it to you because it's a great business. I want to do it myself now. So sadly, and then we decided, do we want to go to court with him in Ireland, And we decided, it's just not worth it. So he paid us a good compensation for our things, for the efforts we put together. Of course, sadly, within a few months, he lost BBC because they said, what the heck, working with you? He knew nothing about software, so all the software guys left. And he ended up he got nothing out of it. I mean, it's just crazy. And he lost the money he gave us. So we learn some battles you fight, some battles you don't, you move on. And I was looking for the next thing to do when I was doing the surgery. And I just saw how badly that private hospital was being run and how awful its services were. And I just...
Do you mean front end or back end? Do you mean like your experience as a patient? Do you mean the back end and the organization? Like everything, right? Okay.
Just awful. Look, they did a knee surgery on me, James, and the surgeon, he's passed away now, so I don't want to name him. And he was a very famous orthopedic surgeon, was doing footballers at the time, right? He got the direction of my knee. He had to reshape my knee. He got the direction wrong. So my knee was like this, right? I mean, my leg. One leg, therefore, was an inch, almost half an inch shorter than the other knee as a result. I go to him, I show it to him. I said, look, this is just not working. And he would say, no, that's all I can do. Then I went to another surgeon, I found through my connections, another surgeon who was like higher than him. And he said, this is awful. But at the time, no surgeon will say the other surgeon has done a bad job. So anyways, I begged him, he called the guy and said, look, you did a wrong job. I don't want to take your job. But unless you do it, I will do it. So I go back and I had to do the surgery again. I had to pay for it again and be treated as if like I am inconvenient. I mean, that's what healthcare used to be like. I mean, the surgeons were gods. The hospitals gave you the minimum amount of 2-3 star accommodation they could. And I just looked at that. And doctors and nurses had no ownership in it. They hated the places they worked. They were completely... And I said, well, why don't we just get Norman Foster to come and design the most beautiful buildings we can have? Why should a hospital be an average 50 years old? Make it look like a hotel, but get the surgical centers to look amazing. Then get the surgeons and the nurses and the doctors to have 50% ownership. In investment banking, we co-own the business. In management consultancy, they co-own the business. Lawyers do. There's no other professionals I know that don't co-own, right? GPs co-own their businesses, right? But and just build the best hospitals in the world. And again, we started with one, and it ended up today in what it is, which is the largest hospital group in the UK, and has just been acquired by pure health, which is, I think, having met the CEO, the owners, and the people behind it, I think it's going to be one of the largest hospital groups in the world.
It's funny because to answer your question, why can't you do all that stuff? Most people just say that it's the sort of conversation you'd have at the pub, like, oh, what we should do is co-own it together, and we'll build buildings, and we'll get this amazing architect and designer to do it, and then you put your empty pint glass down, and then you go home and you say, well, that was a nice conversation and a nice thought exercise, and like they go home. What about you at this point gives you, frankly, the audacity to think I can actually do this at that sort of scale? Because this theme of ambition plus delivery is what starts to come through later in your story with Babylon and et cetera, et cetera. So, like, what was it at this point that gives you the confidence? Because you were solo founder of Circle, right? Although I did speak to someone called Tracy, who I believed worked with you. I saw her yesterday, ended up CEO of the Rwandan stuff at Babylon. So she says hi, by the way. She says she needs to go for dinner with you. But yeah.
Wonderful
solo
person,
founder,
by the way.
Right, fantastic. And I'm sure she is listening because she said she would. Solo founder of Circle, though, now, like, where does that confidence come from?
You see, I don't know whether it's confidence. It's just like asking, going back to our conversation earlier about an artist painting. Where does their confidence come from? We're creating something. Like, if you're a creator, you want to create something. And building a business, we make it so complex in our head. But it fundamentally is about getting a series of things right. The first is people. The second is a product, and the third is processes, right? If you can get these things right, then you can always make it happen. So if you can get the best people possible with the best motivation, desire, drive together, and then have a product that is better than any other product in that market, and then get the process of bringing it to the market, doing the quality control, managing the day-to-day right, you should succeed. I mean, that's why I don't believe when people say building a business is an art or a science. I just think it's both, right? It is an art because you need to do something that people want, that touches people's soul. And it is a science because it's very mechanical, right? You need to get the right person in, the right product, all of that thing. And if you do that, it succeeds. Like, you invite friends to home, you know what you're doing. You know that the process of getting the ingredients right, inviting the right group of people around the table, going through the process of cooking well, you will succeed. Now, if instead you just didn't care about the chemistry of the people and invited a whole bunch of people who didn't get along, bought the cheapest ingredients you can buy, didn't put your soul and heart into your cooking, and gave them rubbish food and the cheapest wine you can find, then they'll have a dreadful experience. So it's all about you. It's about how much do you want to do the right thing and give your guests the best experience. And I find, James, that people who give the best dinner parties, who make their bed first thing in the morning really well, also build the best businesses, also do. It's about who you are. And if you can do one thing right, I bet you do many other things right.
And you took Circle public, didn't you? So that must certainly feel like a real success and, a successful part of your career. I mean, it had its critics, and it had, these moments of, I guess, as all businesses do, mistakes made, etc. But clearly a success in your part.
100%. I just think that I love to hear the critics of Circle. I mean, Circle was a wonderful business. It did incredibly well. It grew fantastically well, delivering a service that people needed. It had its challenges, right? So I give you an example. We raised $500 million pounds at the time, the largest amount of money ever raised in UK by a startup, to build a chain of hospitals. But we raised it from Lehman Brothers and Royal Bank of Scotland. 2007-8, those two guys collapsed. We end up with
Right.
nothing, right? So we had to go
Right.
collect money from hedge funds, this, that, the other, right?
Yeah.
So we had to we didn't have money now, right? So we couldn't build a chain. Our plan was to build these hospitals like Circle Bat, fast and furious everywhere. We had built Circle Bat. We were building Circle Reading, two beautiful buildings still, and we were going to put one of those in every major city in the country. But we ran out of money. Now we're begging hedge funds for money, trying to replace it. Again, what we said, knocking on the doors. At the same time, the government was creating these treatment centers, surgical treatment centers. And the guys who were building them were doing a really bad job in one of the organizations. It wasn't getting along, it wasn't building. So we switched. We went to those treatment centers and we took the Nottingham Treatment Center, the Burton Treatment Center. Each one of those were on the point of collapse. And we turned them into the best institutions they could be. They did actually incredibly well. My colleagues went in there. I remember I had this wonderful colleague who went and lived in Burton and in Bradford and fixed these things and turned them from into great surgical centers. Eventually, they gave us the biggest surgical center of them all, a $50 million building that we finished and we ran in Nottingham. We did it so incredibly well. And then eventually they gave us Hindenburg Hospital, right? The hospital they were going to shut down. And again, within 9 months, we took a hospital that was among the worst performing in the country into the hospital that became the first district general hospital in the country, in the history of NHS, from what I understand, that won the award for the best hospital against all the university hospitals who normally win it, right? So I am incredibly proud of the work our team have done in Circle. Does that mean we didn't have roadblocks, didn't make mistakes? Of course we did. Everybody does. And anybody who believes that they don't do a mistake or haven't done big cock-ups, they're either delusional or they're a liar.
It's tough in healthcare, though, isn't it? Because there's a lot on the line, and mistakes, they can be very emotive. I think to customers in any other industry, it can just be something that happens that day. I think it's innately very difficult to build a business in healthcare, particularly one that's patient facing for that reason, because emotion comes in. You've talked at it at length already, like the value of health to the individual. And I think that's it's where the critics often come from, isn't it? Because it's just such an emotive place, and it can make it quite difficult. But as you quite rightly say, businesses make mistakes, and especially ones that want to make impact still need to go through those. It's just partly about minimizing that, which again, in our industry, it's where the regulators come in. And I guess, I mean, a big part of this is Babylon, right? And I know that we want to talk about Quadrivia, and we absolutely will. But I want to talk about Babylon because I can remember going to your first office in 2013, 14, early 2014 maybe, to see Umang. And he was my registrar when I was on a pediatrics rotation. And so him and I live very close to each other now. He's CCI at Microsoft now, as you well know.
A wonderful man, by the way. You're lucky to know him.
Yes, he is. I am indeed very lucky to know him. And he showed me around your office, and I remember him saying, there's this guy that he's going around saying, like, why can't a computer be a doctor? And bearing in mind, this is 2013, 2014, me as a clinician at this point, it's quite a confronting thing to hear, because immediately you're on the defensive. You're like, oh my God, like 100 reasons, 1,000 reasons, 100,000 reasons, but also maybe none, maybe no reason at all. And it was very confronting. And I remember in that office, there was energy in that office. It was a very small office, and there was a very tight staircase on the way up to it, and I can remember it well. But what do you remember of the very beginning of Babylon? The idea, the first steps you took, was there a feeling of, hold on a minute, this is going to be enormous? What was it like? What was it like at the start?
So Babylon came out of the necessity of Circle. In Circle, I took the company public. I ended up with a dreadful board of directors of a public company. And that was because I wasn't paying any attention. I asked a guy who was a VC investor into uh, Circle that, hey, will you help to put the board together? Because I wasn't just thinking a board really mattered. He hired a guy in his own image and a banker from City or some rubbish like that, a retired guy, who then hired the board of directors in his image, right? And now we did have two or three very good board members, but they were like in minority versus the others. And it was amazing, James. We grew threefold almost a year, 300% a year, every year, until we went public and these guys came to the board. And then from that moment onwards, we didn't grow a single cents, right? Because any idea we wanted to take, they would say, oh, let's hire McKinsey, or let me think about it, or let's bring, I mean, it was just nonsense. And they wouldn't want to invest, they wouldn't want to do anything. It was my first shock about how did I build a business and lost the control to a bunch of people who had never built anything in their life, right? And I think, by the way, that is a disease that happens in many, many of our companies that we don't talk about.
Is that part of being a public company, though?
No,
is that like
not
almost
at all.
a requirement?
There are amazing
No,
public companies like that. Look at Tesla, look at Amazon, look at
Sure.
Facebook, you look at Google, who do so much. We actually, the same group of apparatchiks who now sit on the board of these companies who have never done anything, ex-bankers, ex-lawyers, these things. Not that there is anything wrong with them, but how many ex-entrepreneurs, builders do you find in these boards of companies? Like, because usually, why did this guy want to be on my board? Because he was such a mediocre banker, he still needed money. So at the age of 70, whatever he was, he needed the 50 grand that I had to pay him. So that's why he became on my board, right? Join me. Most entrepreneurs by that age have made enough money that they're not going to bother to take this job. So we've created a system. And then guess what they say? They always say, it's our job, governance, this, that, the other. True, and we have to do those. But let's not forget that the cost is most of our companies and the leadership of most of these mediocre people are doing a really mediocre job. That's just the truth of vast majority of companies out there. And amen to that, because that gives opportunity for people like us to go and try and say, well, if this guy is doing it so badly, why don't we do it better? And the reason I'm saying that is that everyone who's listening to this, your listeners, in almost everything they see day to day, they see a very mediocre thing. The airline they get on is mediocre. The hotel they go to sometimes is mediocre. The food they eat sometimes is mediocre, and sometimes is great. But they need to ask themselves, like, if I don't like what I'm doing and I can do better than this, the opportunity is everywhere. There isn't almost any area of our life that these bigger companies run by this mediocre board guys haven't destroyed that area, right? And we could do the chance of making our society, our environment, the places around us better. It's almost in anything we do. And that's why I'm super optimistic about the future of people being able to become entrepreneurs and deliver much better services, because the barrier to do that has come down. Anyways, we digress. Going back to Circle and Babylon, so I was on my board and I'm just thinking, what do I do? They don't want to invest any money. They don't, therefore I can't build any more hospitals or take them or take more over. They just want to keep what we got. How do I grow, right? And at that time, it was at the beginning of digitization, right? We had mobile phones, but we had app stores, but everybody was thinking, what is it, an application I can put on these mobile phones? Uber had just come up with, I can give you your taxis on your mobile phone. And we just said, why don't we give your doctors on? Now that we can't build hospitals, why couldn't we take our doctors to people's phone? So I did the plan. I went to the board, and I kid you not, this chairman wouldn't even let the plan be discussed on the board. He says that, this is too visionary and that is not for us, right? idiot. And then so I said, okay, you know what? I keep my shares. Thank you very much. I'm gone. So I left to build my own business again, which is incredibly hard, James. You create a baby, it's yours, it's doing really well. You lose it to a bunch of people who have never built anything in their lives, and you can see it killing it. Your employees, your staff are always telling you it's killing it. And I also had a challenge with, I made another mistake in Circle, which was, you know how I said we had 50% of the company for all the employees. We created a group of trustees for the employees. For me not to be among them, just to say I truly gave it to the employees, I wasn't the trustee. And then behind my back, what happened was that the board went to those trustees who were my friends, who were doctors I trusted, right? And said, look, if you agree to the investors taking over that 50%, we give you each a good chunk. In my personal view, from what I heard, I don't know exactly thing. Whatever happened there, I just couldn't be part of. I couldn't. I was watching it, and it happened. I mean, there is no question, right? So you saw then what happened. The employees went from 50% ownership to 10% ownership, and these trustees and management went to 10, 15% ownership themselves, as in the, like collectively. And I learned my lesson. Don't give away control to somebody else of something you built. And so that was the genesis for Babylon.
So you grew very quickly with Babylon. And one of the things that obviously as a venture-backed startup that's going to lead to that incredibly quick growth is raising money, something that you are clearly very good at. I believe, $600 million, still a record essentially for health tech. So clearly good at raising money. What was the idea that you were raising money on initially? And how did that change through the initial part of Babylon? And I can tell you the reason that I ask this is because my perception of knowing a lot of people at Babylon in those early days and being very connected into the health tech system is that you had somewhat of a first mover disadvantage because you were having to swashbuckle your way through a lot of entrenched opinion and lots going on at Babylon, which you seemed quite accustomed to by the end of it, and a lot of people had to catch up behind you in terms of what you were doing. But can you talk to that for me, like the growth of Babylon, that disadvantage, that industry resistance, and how do you raise money on a heavily regulated industry that you're planning on bulldozing with this new idea that that regulators aren't probably going to understand, or know how to catch up to for quite a while?
So when I came out of Circle, of course, the BBC decided to cover it, and so did other newspapers. Parsa left Circle. It was very interesting. I said, I'm leaving to set up a new company. And then the journalists decided, what was the thing? And then immediately I started a new company. But because they said he said he's leaving to set up a new company, I had a few people calling me saying that, look, if you're setting something else up, we want to back it. And I just took a first person who was somebody I knew, and I said fine. And I remember he gave me a couple of $1 million, $2-3 million, something like this, at a $10 million valuation, and he exited at $5 billion valuation, give or take. So he made over 500 times, hopefully, his money, or should have if he exited at the IPO. So it did very well for him. But they didn't come because they came because they knew that whatever we're going to do our very best to make it very successful. And I think that's how you raise money. You don't raise money because you have a good business plan, you go and tell people, trust me, you raise money because people make a judgment on is what you're going to do a valuable thing to do, and if it is a valuable thing to do, are you going to give it everything to make it successful? So I think that people who say you are or anybody is good at raising money, like, investors are not dumb. They're not. You can't just go in and sweet talk them or do a beautiful presentation. Maybe some are dumb, but usually they're pretty smart, and they're doing their maths on, is this thing going to work or not going to work? And for early investors in Babylon, almost it worked incredibly well. And sadly, for the latest investors, it did not. But hopefully, they all know that we did everything we could do to get it right. Look, one of the things that I'm most proud of in Babylon, James, it was a public company in United States on New York Stock Exchange at $5 billion at its peak, and it went into administration. I think it's just about the only public company of its size that I know of, that our lawyers were telling me, that went into administration with zero lawsuit, not one. Right. Usually there are hundreds of lawsuits. Every investor is suing, every supplier is suing. But everybody knew we did our best, and everybody who looked saw there was nothing we did wrong that they can sue. And I can tell you, in all honesty, was zero skeleton in our cupboards. All our people, and that's not because of me, it's because hired people of integrity, principle, people who came in to do the very best they could do. So any investor that was interviewing, doing due diligence, not on just me, on any of our people, like Umang you mentioned, Tracy you mentioned, any ex-Babylonian you almost mentioned. Of course, we get 1%, 2%, 3%, 5% wrong, but vast majority, these were amazing human beings with amazing passion and integrity that did things right. And that's why you raise money.
So what did go wrong, and when did it go wrong? And for people that might have read, the sifted articles and this and that, they see words like 300 million hole in finances, and it can be difficult for people in health tech to kind of understand. But I guess in layman's terms, what happened? Why did it go wrong?
Super simple. Look, we made a lot of mistakes, and I can come to that. But those mistakes were not why Babylon went.
Right.
The reason Babylon went into administration was because we chose to go public through an instrument called a SPAC, which was the rage at the time. Financial institutions were promoting it. It was an easier, faster way to go public rather than an IPO. Our board, our investors wanted us to take it. We, decided, debated, and my fault. At the end, I had control over board, but I chose to go public through a SPAC. Every single SPAC company, without exception, that went public at the same time as we did, so they were in the latter group of SPAC companies, has gone into administration. Not one. So if Babylon didn't go, it would have been a miracle, because the whole system that structurally was against you. Why? We went public at the time that the SPACs were just not the flavor of the month. So SPACs basically collapsed in September. We went public at the end of October, so that we didn't get $300 million that the SPACs were supposed to give us. It's not that they were bad people. Their investors didn't give them the money, so they had no control. They didn't get. Now you're public, a public company with public shares, and everybody can see that you have a $300 million that was not given to you, that would have made your business plan work. All the hedge funds have now decided and seen that SPACs are public companies, so their shares they can buy, but their prices are going down. So hedge funds en masse went and shorted the shares of these group of companies, because they could see the share prices are coming down. You could have done that, right? You see they're all coming down. If you And for those who don't know what shorting is, which is a disease in my view of the financial sector, you basically go in and say that, look, I buy this stock, but I pay you in a month, in a week, knowing that the share price is coming down.
You're betting on a company going down.
Exactly. So the share price is going down, you buy it at a lower price, you make the profit, you do this thing. So now the pressure is all downwards on your stock, right? To buy. And then we're going to people and asking them to give us equity. And people are saying, imagine if I come to you and say, hey, James, we're missing $300 million. It's a great company. It's growing. It was growing at 400% a year, every single year. Its losses are coming down. Everything we said we were going to do in IPO, we did, and we were doing better. And you would say, yes, Ali, it sounds great, but the share price is coming down. It continues coming down because of this. Why would I give you $10 when I can see it's going down? So we didn't get that money. Our investors, sadly, who should have given us the money, were because other companies like us who were also going down. Look at Oscar Health, right? A good friend of mine, Mario, was running it. Oscar, just like us, was coming down from billions of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars. But their shareholders said, here is a few $100 million, go rescue the business, right? Oak Street Health, right? While we were trying to raise 300 million, their shareholders gave them 3 billion, right? And Oak Street was sold for 8. Oscar today is for 5 billion. All you gotta do, great shareholders know that you need to survive the down, because since biblical time, it has been 3 years of famine and 7 years of feast, right? So you survive the 3 years of famine. But our shareholders were not bad people for not giving it to us. They were all growth investors, and all their portfolio of companies were doing badly. So they didn't have the money themselves, right? To give us. They were also suffering. Their own share prices, if they were public, was collapsing. So they were dealing with their own crisis. And we are a public company now. And as private investors, it's not in their mandate to invest in public companies. So they were kind of locked. And then we had a small amount of debt, a couple of $100 million at the time that we were a private public company that were worth 500 million, so 5 billion. So that didn't mean. But the debt holder became a block in us raising debt, because they were, again, rightly from their perspective, they were saying, well, if you guys going to raise any debt, it needs to go below us. And any new debt holder was coming in and was saying, well, why would we go below these guys whose share, the same way the share prices are going down, the debt prices are. And the debt holder had another company that was in trouble, and they kind of stupidly, listening to an investment banker, thought that if they merge these two companies and give a very good asset to a pretty badly run business, they could do something with it. And in reality, that was pie in the sky. And on the day that they were supposed to close that, they killed us back and discovered it was a pie in the sky. They couldn't do it. They were selling their own business. So their new owners didn't want them to get into the business of owning businesses, wanted them just to remain in the business of lending money. So they were not very, they were a small fund. They just didn't know what they were doing, right? Frankly, they're not bad people. They just were incompetent in our area of work. So all of that led to our utterly, in my view, unnecessary collapse of a very, very good company. Having said that, I've learned massive lessons, because your first question has got to be, why did we put us in a situation that we needed these people? And the answer was, at the time, 10, 15 years of money always being available, almost from 2007 to 2021, where we had this collapse. Money was always available. We had all learned that if you're building good businesses and it's growing really well, there is always money. And in the context of what we were creating, $200-300 million in the context of a business that was $5 billion and was growing, wasn't much money left. And it was proved that by the time we went into administration, we really needed another 60-70 million. It wasn't much. But it's super, super sad, unnecessary. But the reality, but it taught me that when the famine comes, the famine comes. It's not that the money is going to be there. Therefore, build businesses that always has enough to survive those 3 years, and never make yourself the hostage of somebody else's control. And it goes back to the same issue of control, right? If you're dependent on somebody else's money, you're giving control away. If you're dependent on somebody else's vote, as we did with Circle, you are giving control away.
And so my understanding then is that you had a functioning business, you had revenues 1.1 billion, I believe, at its peak.
By the end, it was running at 1.5
billion of
growing
revenues.
that fast.
It's just that you were still loss making. You couldn't turn those numbers round in order to survive that period, and therefore you were reliant on that extra capital. Sign of the times, that capital was more difficult to get, and therefore it all starts to go downwards.
And the very sad thing is, you said we're loss making. Our business model was, we were so sure of the quality of the service we were delivering. We were going to insurance companies and saying that, give us the money you spend on this group of patients. We will look after them so well. You're a doctor, you know that. If you're diabetes and I'm calling you every week and I'm making sure you're taking your medication and I'm making sure you have no crisis, your costs are going to be less than others. My apologies for, that's why we're going to go and talk about AI, and that's why you can't 100% trust AI, because you can see every time I do my hands like this,
fireworks go in the background.
In my
it's good for the YouTube edit. If anyone's listening, there are fireworks going off in the back and thumbs up bubbles and things.
But my point is that if you so our customers were super happy. We were saving money, but our agreement with them was, and the customers were saying quite rightly, that look, we can't give you that money that you're going to save until the year is over, a few more months pass, we clean our books and we see what we owe you. And a couple of weeks before we went into administrations, we got the first report saying how much we were saving. And actually, the money that would have been owed to us would have been almost bigger than the money we needed. But it is what it is. Look, every business is loss making until it's profitable, right? You set up your new GP surgery. The first year you have to invest. The second year you have to get your patients. The third year, nothing is profitable from day one. Apart from, now we're seeing a lot of AI companies that everybody's kind of saying, look at them, they're profitable from A1. I question that. Anything that is that easy, I question on longevity, right? I mean, there are guys who have, everybody loves them because they have this feature that adds more voices, or does this website for you, or does something. And everybody says, look, amazing, everybody wants them. But my problem is that if they could build it in 1 year, it's just another feature for OpenAI or Google to add. And then what happens to that business, right? Anything hard takes time.
Yes. So do you have any regrets from that period? Do you have like a couple, like one or two things that stand out that you regret, that you think maybe could have turned it round, or maybe downstream of what happened, there might have been things that you're regretful of? I don't know, but do you have regrets from that period?
Many. I made many mistakes. As I said, the biggest one of them all was to not focus on getting profitable faster, on a faster, because the wisdom of the time, it wasn't just me read any book, right? Read Hoffman to Peter Thiel to anyway. The wisdom of the time, our VCs were telling us, grow faster,
it was the
go
Blitzscale book, wasn't it? The Blitzscaling book by Reid Hoffman.
Exactly, because the money's going to be there. But if you make the assumption the money's going to be there, then of course what you're doing is right. The one thing none of us thought about was that when the drought comes, right? And it comes in a very big way. It's like toilet papers and COVID. At the time, nobody ever thought that toilet paper is not going to be there. And then COVID happens, and, so you need to just be realistic. And the reason I'm saying this is because I can write a book on regrets and on mistakes we made. And at some stage, maybe I will. But I just think that there are two types of people in the world. There is one that loves wallowing on the regrets, on the negativities, on the past, on things that gone wrong. And you see it in your personal life, people who just never let go of what went on yesterday, or the remark somebody made, or something their wife told them, or a friend made it in passing. And there are those who say, what is done is done. What did I learn? And you move on and you do better next time. And that's a personal choice. It's your choice which one of these two people you have to be. So my not talking about regrets is not because I don't have them, or I don't think of them, or it doesn't burn me. The biggest one of them all, many of our employees lost their jobs. Some of them, most of them, they were so brilliant, have found jobs and are doing it. Some never found the job they wanted. Most tell me Babylon was the best place they ever worked, and they're just still in search of a place like that. And our later investors lost their money. Never in my career I had lost money for anybody until this happened. So these are huge, huge regrets that I think about every day. But I need to choose to where to the person I'm going to be and the place I'm going to put my energy. Is it going to be a positive or a negative energy?
Yeah. And most people would, it's often described as Babylon failed. Babylon has failed. It's failure, this word failure. And I think it's interesting. I deal with entrepreneurs every day. They're our clients. They're who I speak to. They're my friends. They're everything. And of course, in many ways, you can describe Babylon to have failed. When you think about it, how you feel, do you feel, and of course, in part, it will feel like a failure. Does it feel like anything else to you?
Of course it does. I just think people who say this failed and that won, frankly, between you and I, are stupid. And I tell you why they're stupid. Because stupidity, there's a great talk by the governor of Illinois, which I ask everybody to watch. And he basically talks about, in life he's chosen not to talk to stupid people. And he says that, but it's very hard to know, you think it's very hard to know who's a stupid, but actually it's super easy to know who's a stupid, because stupid people are people who think they know it all, who are very self-centered, this, that, the other. But it always comes down to one thing: they're not very kind, because the stupidity it's almost an outing of lack of kindness, lack of empathy, lack of understanding, right? Kindness comes with intelligence, with understanding what somebody else had to go through, and how difficult it is to do something, having empathy, right? So I just think it really is stupid to call somebody a failure, or a business a failure. Look, I'm an Arsenal supporter. Arsenal just lost 5 points in the last 2 games. I watch fans who say the team is bad, the team is this, the team. I'm just sitting here and saying the team's entire front line is gone to injury, right? And show me another team whose front line is gone to injury who can survive right now. It had a series of bad circumstances and maybe bad decisions, this and that. But I understand what those people are going through. So I never describe Arsenal as a failure, and as a still second in the league, right? And people are talking about that. Babylon was, I mean, take it by any measure. Early investors in Babylon took hundreds of times of their money out, right? I think that probably people took $1 billion out of Babylon, right? Probably, I have no idea, I don't know, but at least hundreds of millions of dollars. And there are businesses that are sold for $200 million, and everybody says what a huge success they have been. Babylon changed our view of what is possible. It changed our view of our capabilities, that we can deliver medicine on the phone, healthcare on the phone, right? Remember when we first started in 2012, we used to be laughed out of the rooms for thinking that that is possible. Babylon created, there is at least 20 other businesses that were created by ex-Babylonians. Babylonians, often very young people who joined us, are now all doing so well. running so many other big major digital company. I think you told me very hard for you to go to a digital health company right now that doesn't have a Babylonian at its leadership or at its core. These are all huge successes. The company at the end failed because of the circumstances that I described. Um, but but I just think that you just accept that and you move on. There's one other thing, James. I don't think there is ever a failure or a success. Name me one. Just tell me here is a failure, and I'll show you the success in that. And name me, just give me any success, an abandoned success, and I'll show you the failure. Right? Elon Musk, the most successful entrepreneur currently. Look at his personal life. Look at the chaos he lives behind. Look at how he talks about his loneliness and the fact that he has no relationships. Some of his companies really, I mean, questionable how well have they've done or how bad they've done. Look at Tesla, massively successful. But if you bought Tesla a few months ago or a few weeks ago, today, you lost 20, 30% of your money, right? Teladoc, probably still a $2 billion business, right? If you invested in Babylon at the time, Babylon was $5 billion and you owned Babylon, today you would own nothing, zero, right? But Teladoc at that time was worth $40 billion and today is barely $2 billion. So you actually would have lost $38 billion, right? 4 times, 5 times, actually more, 6, 7 times more than what you would have lost in Babylon, right? So I just think you gotta be. There is no such thing as complete success. There's no such thing as complete failure. Life, you just play.
Yeah, and
And by the way, I love to talk to people who think I want to go through that failures of Babylon because I'm incredibly proud of what we achieved. But I'm not proud because of me. I'm proud because we employed 3,000 people who gave it their life and soul. And I'm proud of what they achieved. And I wouldn't have their achievement be talked down.
Yeah, and look, one of the things I mean, is objective reality, and we can agree on, is that the amount of innovation that Babylon inspired, just purely from the number of people that left that have become entrepreneurs, for a start, I think also it showed the health tech world what was possible. But obviously there were critics. I think what's interesting actually is what you said about stupid people and kindness. I think one thing you've actually talked about, or I guess the theme of it is nuance and context, right? And I think,
and nuance takes intelligence,
right? So I think one thing that perhaps you put yourself at the mercy of was a context removal system, which is headline media and journalism and that kind of thing. Now, you went. I mean, you intentionally, clearly went quiet for a year after Babylon, and the problem with that, if you leave a space, if you leave a vacuum, it will be filled, especially one of opinion. And you invite opinion, and you invite story, and we're humans. We love story, and we love to create a narrative. And so it just, like, at the time, to have come out and said, I regret the people lost their jobs. Was it because of advice at the time that you were told to say nothing? Like, what, you invited so much criticism and opinion. You've seen the comments. You were sent that clip where I invited you onto this podcast. You've read the comments. Like, why not come out and say your regrets and those things in the face of those things? Is it because, look, it doesn't matter, I'm building something else? Is it like, I don't know. Like, what drove that decision?
It's again another case of, you say, what do I regret? That's another thing I totally regret. It was really bad thing to do. But I had never dealt an administration situation in US, UK ever before. And I had no idea how you handle this. All the advice we were getting by a board who had taken control of our business, by a lawyers who were minting money and helping us was you do not speak, right? Everything. And I can understand it from their point of view, because the point is that we want they don't know what I'm going to say, and therefore I could say something wrong, right? For instance, whatever could be said. I think that was, with the benefit of hindsight, that was the wrong thing to do, because I think you're right.
Did you want to at the time, out of interest? Did you want to?
Yeah, I would love to.
Because there was things coming out about
the
like, the technology, the AI is just a spreadsheet. This is just like this.
Can you believe that? We had a junior doctor 6 months in our business, most, right? Had almost no role in our business to play. Like then goes and pretends he had a really big job, and the business was a spreadsheet. Our AI was a spreadsheet. We had government of Saudi Arabia, we had major VCs, we had companies that had came in and done huge due diligence on the technology. And then the journalist who reports this guy doesn't go and report the fact that then how silly were all these other people, and how does a spreadsheet do what Babylon did? They do kind of triage, do incredibly well actually in many of the areas. It's AI, considering where AI was then versus where it is today, and people reported that. And I'm just thinking, what kind of person reports that? And nobody goes and search at the fact that that person got 3 other jobs and was fired from all 3, and basically I think now just run a single-handed basically talk shop, right? I mean consultancy or something. And so people like that really upset us, because not again because me, I mean, if they came to me and said Ali's a bad guy, I live with that, right? But because they were insulting the work of some of the best people I know, and they try to hide their own smallness by bringing other people down. And that's what I mean about kindness, right? I told you the things got gone, and I have so many issues with so many people who might have done the wrong thing in Babylon's leadership in terms of that led to our thing. I didn't say a single word against a single individual or their work. Every time I say they done something, is I understand their point of view. They had fiduciary duties, they had pressures from their own investors, they had pressures from their own board, they had to do what they had to do. I just think that the best journalists actually on Babylon didn't write. Many of them contacted me and said to me that, look, I can't get your side of the story, and I'm not going to write something that in a couple of years will
age badly,
put eggs on my face. And you show me any article that was written in Babylon, and I'll show you how ridiculous it was. I mean, there was articles written that were just like pure fiction.
What were the fictional elements that were being written?
I just don't know. Like, there was an article like in Sunday Times by some guy. It just like tried to make it as if we were some, like, took out the list of the times that I was in number 10. Like, honestly, like, you are the most, one of the most advanced British leading technology companies, and you want your government not to talk to you? I mean, or you're never invited to go. And they just took that lesson as if like we had some special relationship with the, by the way, when I was building Circle, the same thing was being told about the Labour government who was in charge. It's the job of a government to promote its businesses, to work with its businesses, to use its businesses. I mean, and then there was another journalist who I believe wrote to hundreds of Babylonians, and about 7 or 8 of them only responded. And all those people usually have, and those 7 and 8 created a narrative as if Babylon was a bad place to work, a dictatorial place. And yet if they talk to hundreds, people usually would say it was the best place they work with the best people. And to talk to Mang, talk to Tracy, talk to all the people you know. Anybody ever says it was a bad place they worked?
Yeah, it's one of those things, like the Sunday Times article stuff. I mean, it's just it's just a shame you hadn't come out and said these, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yes, I agree. Totally
that's
agree.
the challenge, isn't it? Because people can always point to it, and I think there's a lesson there, right? Of like, if you
Yes.
speak your truth and provide that side of the argument, it can provide the context. But again, I work in media, man. Like, if you leave a vacuum, it will be filled, and people will fill it with story and opinion. And I can remember being in. Well, look, I can remember being in some meetings when I was at some of the arm's length bodies to Department of Health, and there was lots of public narratives at the time about junior doctor numbers, particularly GP training numbers. And we were a group of fellows, we were across, all the arm's length bodies. And so we talked to each other about the meetings and things that were going on. It was fascinating being behind the scenes, fascinating. But then you would see the public narratives and some of the things and all these sort of conspiracy theories that were being talked about. And we were in those meetings, but between us, we were in a
Yes.
lot of these meetings, right? And it was
Yes.
sort of don't attribute to a real complex, intelligent conspiracy theory what you can attribute to mistakes and like the other side of it, right? And so I can see how that stuff develops. It's just that
You're 100% right.
you had a narrative, but it is what it is. What I will say though is that I do think that Babylon inspired a lot of innovation. It really did. There were so many people that came out of it that started companies, and I think and I've said this to a few people, right? If we vilify by default, and look, I think we do. Media will vilify by default some things. A big company fails, people lose their jobs, pension funds have lost money, this, that, and the other. These things, quite rightly, will be vilified to try and prevent them, and like bring a disincentive and that side of things. I think there is a knock-on effect with ambition and health tech, because if we vilify betting big and it going wrong, what does that say about health tech? Now, I think there's another side of it. That another reason people get emotive about it is because at the time of Babylon going down, investors were losing confidence in digital health anyway for various reasons. We're in the post-COVID bubble was down, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs also point to Babylon and say, "Oh, well, that's part of the reason we can't raise is because there's this big thing that happened and all that sort of stuff." I think it's pointed to in that way as well. How much truth do you think there is in Babylon was holding a lot of the confidence in digital health, and everyone was hoping for this huge IPO and success to drive the rest of the digital health industry? Do you think there's truth there?
Yes, of course there is, because many investors are herd alike, right? Babylon works, let's just invest in the next. Babylon doesn't work, let's not invest in the next, right? But the most intelligent investors didn't do that. There are many good companies who kept being invested on and today are taking the benefit. And I always think, I learned this, and people who come up with excuses, they can come up with excuses, right? And there is something you said, by the way, I disagree with. You said that these things are quite rightly verified. I don't think it is. I don't think verification of anything,
Yeah,
anyone,
that's
is
fair.
quite
That's
right,
fair.
right? Because I just think that you do your best, and you have to be super careful when you verify people who try to do their best and they fail. What you're doing, nobody was verifying Babylon, they were verifying failure after we failed, right? At the beginning, and by the way, all of that newspaper articles, all of those negativity primarily was UK. You go into where 99% of our business was US, right? Out of the 1.5 billion, 1.4 billion of it was US, right? Give or take, right? Almost. And the rest was wrong. That they said there is not a single right. This just was a UK thing, and I can tell you when it started and why it started. But the that verification is bad for us, because what it does, it tells the next group of people, be careful. If you fail, disaster will happen. You do this, and when you say VCs lost money. It wasn't pension funds losing money, because actually by that time, no pension fund invested in our IPO, zero, because the IPO was not going there. It was just VCs and people who build in the growth. And these businesses are in the business of taking risk and sometimes making 500 times, as they made with our early investors, and sometimes losing it. Like your average VC has one or two huge success stories, 3-4 failures, and 4-5 mediocre that return their business. That's their business, So they are also in that business. So you can't say just because the 8 work, their business doesn't work. So I just think that all of these kind of conversations are designed by those who don't do to justify the fact that they don't do. Right? When Babylon went under, great entrepreneur, and I tell this story often because I am so indebted for her, called me almost on that day, the next day, I can't remember, personally, and said, Ali, it's gone, you're going to get, he actually encouraged me to speak. He said, I know you, I know Babylon, you should go out there. I said, look, these lawyers are saying I can't go against them, right? Look, the thing was so bad, James, that my board, when I left the company, I wrote a long, warm-hearted message to all my employees thanking them. They didn't allow that message to go out. Can you believe that? I left my own company hiring them. They wouldn't let me send a message to my employees, thanking them for their work, explaining that. Anyways, so we were in that circumstance, so I couldn't speak. But he said that as a result, you're going to get a lot of criticism. And he said to me, you could get upset or not upset. You will. It's human. You will get upset. Of course, I get upset. But I ask you to do one thing. Show me a criticism from somebody who's done more than you have done, and then you have the right to be upset. I will promise you that not a single person who has done more than you have done will criticize you. And your criticism comes from people who are hurting themselves. Maybe they couldn't do what you guys have done. Maybe they are not there and they're trying to just justify that. That's the reason why we are not there, right? And I'll challenge you, show me a single criticism on Babylon that was done by people who built bigger than Babylon or better than Babylon. In the US, by the way, there are many entrepreneurs like this, right, who have. They don't, right? They came from junior managers, junior entrepreneurs, junior VCs, right? All our VC friends, all the people who invested in us, the only person who publicly said anything, and that thing was the smallest one of them all, who is a tiny little irrelevant fund somewhere. All the big guys, they didn't say anything, right? It goes to what I said. I honestly believe people who criticize, who put other people down, were not kind, by and large, is a result of not being very intelligent, because they don't understand what others go through.
So after your year, you came back. Now, you're someone who, clearly looking at your career history, you had enough money. You didn't need to come back for the money. And you've said before, money, when you're creating, doesn't necessarily motivate you, and it doesn't need to at this point. So Quadrivia, well, first of all, why come back? What's the conversation that happens? What's the moment that you decide, do you know what? I've had a year. I've read all these things. I'm gonna go back into the lines then and have another go, like, or put myself up for the criticism, or or do you ignore that and just go, actually, I've got an idea. I want to create something. Is it that you wanted to move the best of Babylon, into the next thing? Like, what's the moment that you decide to do this?
So Babylon went into administration on the 17th, I think, of October, something like that, precisely 2 years after it went public. And we registered Quadrivia at the end of October. So we didn't come back a year later. I came back 2 weeks later.
Wow, okay.
We took some of our best AI team and we said, look, the world is changing in AI. And we can now do so much of what we wanted to do in AI, but the technology wasn't there, and we were kind of putting what was available together, and we can build it. And our math, our belief was the motto, the mission of Babylon was to make healthcare accessible, affordable for every human being on earth. And if you look at this, James, and you ask yourself, why is healthcare not accessible and affordable for everyone? Just think about it, right? And the reason for that is that healthcare is almost uniquely, there are others, but healthcare is almost unique, is an industry in which there is a structural imbalance between supply and demand. And in anything where you have an imbalance, rule number one of economics, supply and demand imbalance, you and I talked about COVID and toilet papers, right? There's nothing more plentiful in our societies than toilet paper. But at one short period of time, there was more demand than supply. You remember toilet papers were being traded for 20 quid, 50 quid, right? So in healthcare, what we have is an elastic demand. Your child, God forbid, goes ill, you will spend any money, any time, any effort you can to fix it, and a very constrained supply. There is only so many of you. Our universities are created to create so many of you as clinicians, and that supply and demand has chronically, structurally never matched. And when you have far more demand than you have supply, what you do, you need to rationalize it, either make it inaccessible or unaffordable or both. And that's the reality we're facing. This morning, I was reading something from a friend of mine who just says that him and his family of 4, he's one of the fittest people I know, is spending in the United States to get completely accessible, brilliant healthcare around $100,000 a year. So you either have to throw a lot of money at it, so because it's supply and demand. And I thought, and we believed, and we were working on it in Babylon at the time, that what has happened with the new advances in AI is that we now have the capability to work towards, it's not there yet, but to work towards unconstrained, elastic supply of clinical skills. And I believe that if you can create elastic supply of clinical skills, you can match the demand with supply, and I think you can make healthcare accessible, affordable for everybody on earth. That's why it took us 1 week to start our next business, because we have an absolute belief it can be done, and we were super focused on getting it done. So there wasn't a single person in Babylon I called, and I said, guys, we're going to go and continue our mission because it is more possible now, who said no to me.
And that elasticity is coming from where? That elasticity is coming from AI.
I just think that we can create AI agents now that will do many of the things that a doctor and nurse can do. I don't think, to your point you were saying earlier, that it can care, it can do empathy, and it can pretend it does. But I think that AI will do the health, leaving humans to do the care and of the healthcare. Do you just think of the process of, you and I were talking about a GP or a technical process of consultation. As a doctor, what do you need to do? There's 10 steps you did during a consultation. Step 1, you need to understand medicine incredibly well, right? AI can understand it, learn it, and more importantly, can do it better than you, because medicine is now growing at such incredible pace that the AI can retrain itself on a daily basis. 2, you need to understand and read. If you're a good doctor, you will read in detail the person's clinical records. AI can do that. 3, you take history, you talk to the person, ask them a question, what's wrong with you, take them through it all. AI can do that very well now. I can have a conversation with you, collect information, and more importantly, it doesn't have time limit. It's not like you being a GP and you got 7 minutes slot. It's got 25 minutes. It could do that. It's irrelevant, right? 4, you form hypothesis for what you told me this could be the potentials. We've now have published papers. You've seen various papers published by various people that demonstrates that once given the right history and clinical records, AI can make better diagnosis on its own than a doctor and even AI can do. I mean, Eric Topol wrote about it recently on another paper. Five, you then say for each of these hypotheses, this is the test or investigations you need to do to confirm or deny the hypothesis. That's a very simple, almost one-to-many problem AI can solve. Six, AI would say, then this is the best doctor you could go to. Again, looking at the statistic completely unemotionally, not saying this guy is my friend or this is the guy I play golf with. And you can choose the best doctor for you. Seven, that doctor that diagnose. I think AI should not diagnose yet, even though it probably can do an incredibly good job, because I think into diagnosis goes many other factors, including subjective ones, that a human needs to intervene. Eight, then you prognose, you say, here is what is, this is the treatment you need to do. Again, for each diagnosis, AI should be able to say what is the best treatment and the most available treatment. Nine, you're a very good doctor, the kind of concierge doctor you pay $100,000 for, would follow up with you on are you taking your pills, are you doing your exercises, motivates you, make sure you go through your recovery. In reality, nobody does that. No doctor has the time to do it. But AI can do that because it's freely available. And then 10, you discharge, right? You write your notes, you put it back. AI can do that. So when you dissect the problem into its constituent members, you could see that each of those members can be built, each of those constituents can be built. And that's what we're doing. We're building them one by one and orchestrating these agents to become an assistant to every doctor. So a doctor like you or many other doctors anywhere, they could just say, look, my GP surgery from 9 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock, from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock is overwhelmed with triage groups, right? What, 5, 6, 4 of my doctors, my colleagues, my nurses are doing that work. Completely low value add work, if you want, because at the end, all you're doing is saying, go to the pharmacy, come to see me, come in 2 weeks or come today. AI can do that triage incredibly well, and that will free hours. Now imagine you're a GP surgery. A friend of mine has a GP surgery. 9 of his staff for 2 hours from 8 to 10 almost do that work. Let's call it £50 an hour. 9 people, let's call it £500 a day. He spends on that as an owner, right? He then multiply that money, 10 people by £55,000. Sorry, £500. Multiply it by, let's say, 200 days of the year they do that, and that's 100 grand, right? AI can do that work probably for 20. Right, and have it supervised by other clinicians, so that it's not just AI, it's clinicians and AI doing it. It's a very clear clinical service. They can outsource to somebody else or let the AI do it, and that GP can put another £80,000 into the practice. The patient have far better experience because they don't have to call at 8 o'clock. They can call at 3 a.m. It doesn't really matter. AI is up 24/7, and by the way, nobody has to wait in a queue because 20,000 people calling AI can answer at the same time. So how many, when you were an anesthetist in a hospital, how many clinical processes, routine, simple clinical processes that you can now outsource to an AI?
A lot.
And if you did that, how much more time would that give you to be a proper doctor, right?
A lot.
That's why we're building Quadrivia, and I'm incredibly bullish about it. And I think that we, together with other people who are doing similar things, will make healthcare accessible and affordable to everybody. The current model of healthcare will become accessible and affordable.
And there are a lot of other people doing similar things, but you made a good point earlier where if it looks simple, you're skeptical of it, and therefore you're someone that's clearly known for being ahead of your time in the way that you've put. I mean, Babylon was sort of 10 years too early almost in a lot of regards, and it took a long time for the market to catch up with sort of understanding where it could fit in and how, etc. What's different about Quadrivia to the rest of similar looking products? Because you broke it down really nicely there in terms of the 6.
Name me who's doing a similar thing. It's really interesting because I'm Iranian by birth, right? Many people look at me and other Iranians and say you guys all look the same. And we look nothing.
Can you say that these
we
days?
look nothing the same, right? And it's the same with AI. I actually know of no other AI company who's doing what we're doing. It's really interesting. There are many AI companies who are doing transcribing.
I was going to say,
right?
is this the end-to-end nature of what you've described?
Yeah, and it's also like most people are doing administrative work,
Yeah.
right? Now, as a doctor, you hate your administrative work, right? And therefore, you're complaining about it. You don't like it. As a VC, as an entrepreneur, is a very easy problem. Like, honestly, I don't get it. Like, you and I can put a function up on this thing we're talking about. It transcribes all of our conversation very accurately. And if I ask it to summarize it, it does that very accurately. Very low barrier to entry. And I think all those transcription businesses, I can't imagine, apart from one or two of them, who will migrate to do something more meaningful, will go anywhere else. And then but as a VC, you love it because most VCs don't have much money. So this is a very easy problem. It requires very small amount of money. So you just back somebody to go do it, right? It's not solving the big, real problem. And as a whole, administrative services, even though it's a fashion and everybody says because of this collusion of everybody that I just described, say is a good thing. Frankly, how much of your time went into administration? Let's just say 20%. Let's just say it's gone crazy, 30%. The problem in healthcare is not 30% more supply. 30% more supply is not going to do anything. We need 300% more supply in our own countries, let alone in the half the world that have zero supply. And it's the clinical services that we need to solve for, which are much, much harder to do. And that's why I don't actually believe, I can't name another company that I know that is doing the extent of what we're doing. I can actually know one or two who are doing maybe more clinical rather than the medical part of what we're trying to do. I know some who have raised insane amount of money. I look at their product with very little money. We have a better product in my view. I can show it, right? And so I just think that there is a lot to do now. By no stretch of imagination, I think we will be. I hope we will never be the only game in town. I'm sure there will be many others who will come in and do this. But this is a massive $10 trillion industry. And there is room for so many to do so much.
It must be interesting for you to now be building Quadrivia at a time where there's a lot more market pull. Because when you built Babylon, I mean, Frank, to give you a real example here, Keith Grimes is not going to get roundly booed off the stage of the Royal Society of Medicine if he talks about this type of technology, right? And this type of thing. This is a very different environment because, you know, Keith getting that treatment when talking about this is frankly hard to believe that was even a thing, like how disruptive that felt to so many people in the industry.
Can you think about this? I remember that instance really well. The reason Keith did it, who is a phenomenal human being, one of the kindest, most intelligent people, right? Goes on the Royal College of Surgeons, sits next to a guy who has completely disappeared, who clearly had some issues because he was doing thousands of tweets on Babylon. Like his entire raison d'etre, his entire existence was to put Babylon down. And since Babylon's gone, he's gone. Who knows where he is, right? And his accounts are gone. Like, I mean, who was he? Was he getting, we've heard all sorts of rumors about financial and so who knows, right? I don't even want to go there. But if you were one of the people who were laughing at Keith at that time or booing him, how would you feel today? Seriously, how that should that person, right? Because everything he stood for and argued for proved over time that was the right path. Now, it might have fallen, right? Like you can have an athlete and the athlete falls, but the game of running wasn't the wrong thing. Like nobody was. And I just think that, and it goes back to kindness. I don't know of anybody who was kind, and there were many in that audience, who booed him or laughed at him or did the wrong thing by him. And those who did, shame on them for doing that to one of the kindest, nicest, most intelligent human beings out there. I mean, how can that even happen? What kind of cruel society we live in? And by the way, the reason I say that and get emotional, because I care about these people who went through what they did. But more than that, I care about the society in which I live in today. And I see, I'm not on Twitter or X, because I see nothing but that kind of unkindness. We have now given a license that makes it okay to be unkind. We, to our society, I think our culture is what we tolerate. That's it. Our culture always becomes the lowest common denominator of what we tolerate. And in the last few years, we made it, with the advent of social media, the fact that you can hide, give yourself a pseudonym and say whatever you want to say, right? And have no consequences. We've made it possible to be incredibly unkind. And this is becoming a real issue in our society. And that's what I take issue with.
Well, I agree. I actually think if you're not willing to put your name next to a statement, then it probably doesn't deserve any airtime. I think that it's a strange world that we can live in. I know there are arguments to the anonymous voice providing this, that, and the other. I don't know. When it comes to something like that, I do agree. I think so. It's interesting because Quadrivia is built at a time where you're not going to face that. You're not going to face that. So is this going to be easier? Do you think?
No, we will face something else, and there has never been anything of impact built ever that didn't have its own criticism.
Well, this is the thing.
Issue.
So where do you think that's going to come from, Quadrivia? Where are you?
I don't know. It'll come from somewhere. I mean, in Babylon, it came from a quarter we never expected. We were the darling of GPs in UK, in Babylon. Every doctor used to, at the early days, if you go back to all the good articles about things. And then when we decided to serve NHS together with other GPs, the government, quite rightly, because they said, look, our contracts are not as such that we can give you a contract jointly with another GP. You have to take a GP contract and you need to build your own practice. And we started building our own practice in UK. And what GPs saw, single-handed, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, like owners of their own business. Remember, we all think GPs don't work for the NHS. Like some of them work for other GPs and some GPs own their own shop, right? Their own clinic that is contracted to the NHS for the patients. So they're all basically, and they see that here comes this company that can deliver services within minutes while my patients have to wait a couple of weeks, that people on their thousands are going to it. I think Babylon's GP at hand service in London became at one stage, I read somewhere, the fastest growing service in the history of the NHS in terms of number of people coming in. And you panic. You look and you just start being defending your own thing. Nothing. That's exactly what they should do. In the same way that a small shop panics against Amazon coming or against and the consumer, of course, if they don't, it's raining and they don't want to go to the shop and order from Amazon, they may, everybody's doing the right thing for their own thing, right? I mean, so, and with Quadrivia, same thing may happen at some stage. I also think, unfortunately, in UK, in most places, but UK also, they have this disease of bringing people up and then bringing them down. And a friend of mine is a very senior publisher of a newspaper, been CEO of some of our largest newspaper and globally now. And he once told me a really good point. I called him and I said, look, what's this thing? And he said, Ali, put yourself in the shoe of a journalist, right? The first story is to discover you, right? Phase one. The second story is to go on top and say, not only this guy discovered this, but there is even better and there is even more. So they build you up, right? But then there is no story in that anymore. Now you've been built up. Now there is no story in that anymore. The third story is to bring you down, right? And that's what happens. So they find the story, it's something negative, because that's the only thing to read now. And eventually, hopefully, if you survive all of that, you will become kind of just normal part of the thing. And you see that about everybody. So it goes with the territory. And I fully expect it to happen with Quadrivia too. And I don't blame people who do it because it's their business. Remember, if you're a journalist, you can make up anything you say. I am writing truth. I'm doing this. At the end, you need the click, you need the advertisements, you need the subscriptions. It's a money business. I mean, you and I talked about Sunday Times, and Sunday Times has sometimes glorified itself to sound something really kind of hyper. It's a Murdoch rag. That's what it is. It's a Murdoch rag. It's like it's about making money, and it's about getting the advertisement. It's about selling the subscriptions. It's a business, right? And they all are. And I don't blame them for it. That's a job. That's a livelihood. That's a business. And we need to, as a whole, accept people do what they do. Don't take it too personally. Understand their motives, and understand they have to sell us stories and they have to come up with them. And it is
Absolutely. So, Ali, I know we're running out of time. I appreciate you giving us some of yours. What can we expect differently this time? Are you going to be raising a huge amount of money? Are you going to be giving the board control again? I imagine there's a few things that are going to be done slightly differently.
Look, we will make our mistakes again. There's no questions, right? It'll be different mistakes from what we learned. There is no one who does anything that doesn't make mistakes. So I don't want to have this childish, we learn all our lessons and we won't make those mistakes. If we make the same mistakes, shame on us. But we will make different kind of mistakes. I have no doubt. But as we come to an end, I think a couple of things. One is the fundamentals of what we are doing is incredibly valuable. If we can provide far more supply in clinical services, that will solve many problems for our clinicians everywhere, but for our doctors everywhere. And for that reason, I wish us every success. And I wish everybody else who does that every success, because this is a problem that is solvable and we should solve it. And I invite your listeners to come and join us, to contact me. We love to serve your thing, but we want you to be our co-developers, co-pioneers. Let's find out what is a service in your GP practice that we can take out and get AI to do it to your benefit and create service? What's the service in your hospital that we can do? And the second thing is that I will do differently this time. Let me actually change that. The thing that I will do the same, which is more important this time, I will still keep partnering, having employees that I think are phenomenal, that are passionate, that are fantastic, that are people who want to do the right thing for the world rather than themselves. And then hopefully in the process, they do the right thing. But we still will build the best product in the world, or as far as we can. Like, we will always give it everything to make it an amazing product. And if you look at Quadrivia right now, it's incredible. But we also will do it with the modest amount of money now. So we learn, like, there is a company in the United States, honestly, James, has raised 100 times more than we have. 100 times. I have absolutely no idea where all that money has gone. And I couldn't say that until DeepSeek came and showed how it's 6 million. Now let's call it 60 million even, because some people say it's not that. Did exactly what OpenAI did with God knows how much is gone. Let's call it 10 billion so far, right? I couldn't say that, but now I can, because it's just absurd, right? I could just see we built this and they built that. But I also understand why people give them so much money, because some of these financial institutions have so much money that they have to park it somewhere and they build these stories, right? So my only thing to your listeners is, one, come and join us. Either as customers, as partners, as employees. We're looking for partners above all to co-develop these clinical services that can be done by AI. It'll benefit you, makes your life easier. It'll benefit us. It allows us to learn this together with partners. But also to the younger people, older people, the entrepreneurs, just go build it. The world has never been easier. The problem is huge. It has never been easier to build something. And it's hard, but it's worthwhile. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I guess the very final thing is please be kind. Honestly, like we just need to go on a global joint humane mission now to save our societies from all these unkindness that are going out there, this anger, and we're seeing it in our politics. Don't get me started on that. I mean, and to me, that's by far the most dangerous thing that is happening to our societies. Is we are normalizing lack of kindness.
Ali Parsa, it's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like we've been on a journey, haven't we, the last 2 hours? I can't believe we've actually lasted this long, but I agree. What a note to finish on. Be kind. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks.